All right. Hello, everyone. How are we all doing today? Love to hear where you're all tuning in from. Hope everybody's having the most joyous day today. If you're tuning in for the first time, hi. My name's Ramon. My friend Jess and I are doing a free web development bootcamp based on Free Code Camp's responsive web design certification. And if you're tuning in for the first time and you're like, oh gosh, I need to catch up, don't worry. Everything is free. Everything is self-paced. Everything is up on you. Pardon me. Everything is up on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/@badwebsite club, you'll find everything you need there. All of the videos are not pre-recorded. They're recorded live. Couple links before we get started. Code of conduct. By participating in this bootcamp, you adhere to our code of conduct. Please check it out at bit.ly/BWC-COC. We have a Discord channel. I'll throw links into the chat just to make sure that you're all up to speed and brought in as needed. You can also post in the Free Code Camp forum if that's more your liking. I love me a good forum. There you go. And finally, if you want to find out what the schedule is, let me post a link to that in the chat. And actually, let me open it up here so that y'all can see it. Oh, look at me having highlighted it yesterday and left it highlighted. So today we're learning CSS Grid by building a magazine. Next week is the last week of the bootcamp. That date is still incorrect. Let me refresh real quick. Hey, I fixed it yesterday. Cool. So, right, next week is the last week of the bootcamp. We've also got one more amazing guest session by Phil Hawksworth from Netlify, who's going to introduce us to Netlify, essentially. It's going to be amazing. So don't miss that. And with all of that said, I'm just going to hop right in because yesterday we started learning about CSS Grid. And what I wanted to start today with was just recapping a little bit, as well as checking out this example of CSS Grid, because I think it serves really well to illustrate what the power is of CSS Grid and help us develop our magazine further. So this is an example from MDN. Actually, let me send out a link to their guide because it's really, really solid. So going into the chat now, I'm going to highlight it here. Bink. Yeah. So what we've got here, I'm just going to click here on play so that we can check out the code because I think it's really helpful. What we've got here is a wrapper div with 6 divs inside it with the classes 1 through 6. And you can see how they're displayed here in kind of an interesting layout that kind of overlaps as well. And this is by design. This is the power of what we can do with CSS Grid. So I'm going to skip a couple of these CSS styles and move right into the grid itself. So we've got our wrapper is a grid. It's got a template of columns that repeats 3 times over of 1 fraction. So the layout of this grid is divided into 3 columns, right? 1, 2, 3. You can kind of see how they're laid out. There's 1 column here, column number 2 here, column number 3 here. So it's repeated 3 times over and it's 1 fraction. So it's divided equally 3 ways. The gap between each column and row is 10 pixels. And you can see that split here. I hope y'all can see my mouse, right? Yes, great. Yeah, you can see here this divide. And the rows themselves, we're using the min-max to say, okay, the min-max function to say, okay, be at least 100 pixels high because it's rows. So 100 pixels in height and automatic height otherwise. So at least, this is saying at least be 100 pixels tall. But the part I really want to cover right now is this here, the individual layout of each part of the grid. Remember, we've got 6 divs in here. So what we're doing here is declaring with grid column and grid row where a part of the grid, let's call it a section of the grid starts and ends. So let's look at the column first here of 1. So grid column will start at the first column and end at the third. And you can see it here. Starts at the first and ends here at the third column. Row, it says, hey, I'm just at the first row. So 1 row down, 2 rows wide. We can change this, and this is what I wanted to play around with. What if I make this row 2? Oh, check it out. It already changed immediately. So now 1 starts at the second row and ends at the second row. Now it's overlapping quite strongly with the third div here. But this is how this works. So I can go from 1 until 2, for example. Let's take a look at that. So that looks the same because it's ending at the second column, the second row, pardon me. If we wanted to go down another, we just go, hey, start at the first one, end at the third row. Look at that. So now it's going from the first to the second row. It's kind of a square now. Let me restore that to how it was. Whoopsie daisy. There we go. And let's take a look at the other ones. 2 here starts at the second column, ends at the fourth. That is, it's 2 columns wide. It's also starting at the first column, ending at the third. It's a row. It's starting at the first row and ending at the third. So it's 2 rows high. 3 over here starts at the first column, ends at the first column, at the second column, pardon me. But look at this. It starts at the second row and ends all the way down at the fifth. So 2, 3, 4. It's 3 rows high. 4 over here is a little bit shorter hand. Starts at the third column, ends at the fourth column. Starts and ends at the third row. 5 over here, second column, fourth row, and 6 starts at the third column, fourth row. And this gives us look at all the power we have to really like manipulate this grid. For example, let's say 6, I wanted to put 6 here. That would make it second column, already move 1 over, and third row. So even though we declare these to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, CSS Grid gives us the ability to really move these around as we like. And this is going to be really handy for building our magazine. So now we're going to hop back over to where we were here. We were at step 42. Apologies for the delay. Just wanted to cover a little bit of grid stuff. And hop right in. So let's just take a step back and go see where we were. Actually, I'm going to go one step back because I'm just going to check what our last one was. So we had our grid column property that determined where the column starts and ends at. In order for it to go all the way to the end, we can use -1. So our hero, what we did was I set our hero selector to go from 1 to -1. Hero goes from grid column 1 until -1. And that allows our hero here to go all the way to the end of the columns. Mitch says that was a useful demonstration on MDN. I know, right? I'm so glad you agree, Mitch. I'm not going to pat myself on the back for this one because we did it yesterday. Well, let's start right at the beginning now at step 42. So we're going to set our position to be relative. So nothing changes yet. And I bet that's going to be because we're going to set some stuff around. 7 pounds 84 says, hello to you. Hope you're doing good. Position relative. Check that. All good. Pat ourselves on the back. Pat, pat. And we keep going. Oh, cool. So now we're going to start removing the discrete width from our images. So we're going to remove the temporary width attribute before writing the CSS for our hero image. So width is going to go away, which means it's going to stretch all the way. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's huge now. But we're going to fix that with some CSS, I'll bet. Pat, pat. And here we go. So our image selector is going to have a width of, so all of our images are going to have a width of 100%, and then object fit set to cover. Oh, great. We're getting a description. So this object fit property is going to tell our browser how to position the element within its container. So even though the width is 100%, the image wants to stretch itself all the way, but cover is going to tell it like, hey, no, just fill the container itself. So now you can see it's filling the full width of this hero part. Let's take a look at our markup real quick and see where that image is. So you see image is inside hero, and the image, so the image here is covering the full width of our hero container. Narnia Expert says, hi, I'm watching from Colorado Springs, USA. Oh gosh, it must be so late there, but great to see you. Thank you so much for joining. Cool. So that's done. Passes. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. So we're going to create a hero title selector. Give it a text align property set to center. So our there we go. Our H1 is now centered. The color is going to be set to orange red, which you can't tell me otherwise. I read this as orangered. Learner says, hi, everyone. Hey, Learner. Hope you're doing good. Our font size is set to, boom, 8 REM. Nice and big. Now this has got like a big magazine-like thing going. Like, look how exciting. Our new curriculum. Narnia's asking, Narnia Expert is asking, how common is the support for CSS Grid? Can this be expected to have widespread support for legacy device browsers? This is a great question that I'm going to take a look at in just a second. Let me just submit this. Pat. Let me show you all a website that's really handy for this sort of thing. So legacy in this head, in this case, is older browsers, right? And I'm going to show you all a resource called Can I Use? This is an excellent way to see how widespread is the use of certain tools in older browsers. So I'm going to check that there. Learner says as long as it's not IE or Internet Explorer should be supported. But here's the thing, just in case y'all are worried, Internet Explorer is no longer maintained nor supported by Microsoft. So that means securely, we shouldn't be targeting Internet Explorer. However, of course, there's still going to be devices that use it. So let's check out Grid real quick. So we can see here how widespread Grid is. So we can see that Chrome currently supports it. We're at version 116. Oh, Mitch says you can see CS Grid is listed in the most searched features. My goodness. So check it out. All the way from version since 2017, it's been supported in Chrome. 2017 for Edge. Safari is 2017. Firefox is 2017. 2017 for Opera. IE, partial support in IE refers to for supporting an older version of the specification. So it doesn't quite work in IE or Internet Explorer. Opera Mobile doesn't seem to support it, which is interesting. Oh, but Opera Mini, but it doesn't seem to be maintained anymore because that was released in 2015. So good to know. But I said IE or Internet Explorer is not really supported anymore by Microsoft, so I wouldn't be too concerned with it. That's my very, very high-level take. Back to our exercises, though. Let's go back to Hero Subtitle. We're going to give it a font size property set to 2.4 REM. A color of, and Learner says that he read it as angered. Oh no, now I see it as well. I still see orangered, which of course isn't a word, but and the text align property is sent to center. So there we go. Again, a nice magazine-like look. Check our code. Pat. Let's keep going. Oh. Great. So we're going to be styling all of our text. This is exciting. So our author is going to have a font size property set to 2 REM. Font family is going to use our Railway font. And while that's loading, or if that's not supported on our computer, we're going to set that to sans serif as a fallback or a backup. So while Rayway is not being loaded, it'll show the sans serif font instead. Learner says, sorry for pinging on Twitch. I don't know what you mean. You're totally fine, Learner. Cool. So that passes. Pat. Amazing. Oh, okay. So we're going to have an author name. Oh, here we go. Selector, where when we hover over the link, remember that's a pseudo selector for applying styles when we're hovering over the link. And that's going to change the background color property to hashtag 3062. Oh my goodness, 6203. So this is going to create a hover effect only while, oh, Learner, amazing. So there's a link there that Learner shared, developer Mozilla.mdn for CSS at support. Sorry again. Don't apologize. You're good. This is great. Thank you. So that'll show us where grid is supported. No, what is supported by CSS. My bad. Let's take a look at that link real quick. That supports. Aha. So, oh, this is immediate. This is kind of a query that lets you say, hey, if the browser supports Flexbox, then use it. Thank you, Learner. This is really handy. I'll post that into the other chats as well. Amazing. Sorry. So when we hover our author now, it's going to create a background color. Check it out. Ah. So that's quite handy. Great. Pat. Let's keep going. Cool. So our publish. We're going to style our publish date. Give it a color property of RGBA. Ooh. So it's going to have 255, 255, 255, which is white. But it's got a fourth one, the alpha channel or the opacity, like how transparent it's going to be. So the 0.5 is going to tell it, hey, be 50% transparent, which gives it a sort of grayish color. Great. Pat. Let's keep going. Now we're going to do a selector for our social icons. I'm going to display that as a grid. Notice the social icons are now one on top of each other because by default we're showing a column. Font size is going to be 3 rem. So now the icons are going to be significantly larger. Fantastic. Pat. So, unlike Flexbox, CSS Grid is going to show everything in rows. So we're going to set up the layout for our grid for the icons to be grid template columns to be repeat. We're going to have 5 columns, each of which is 1 fraction wide. So it's going to evenly divide these up into 5 columns. And that already looks great. Oh, sorry, I just saw that you posted something, Learner, and I wanted to read that out. So fun aside, RGBA is now converted into the RGB function with the syntax RGB/A, where A is the opacity in decimal or as a percentage. Super cool. Great, so there's our grid set into 5 columns, 1 row. It passes, pat. And you see how quickly that goes from like complex to pretty cool layout. If we did want it to have more icons, but keep some of them on the same row, we would need to update template grid columns to create additional columns. As an alternative, we can use the grid AutoFlow property. So this property is going to take either row or column as the first value with an optional second value of dense. So grid AutoFlow uses an auto placement algorithm to adjust the grid layout. Setting it to column will tell the algorithm to create new columns for content as needed. And the dense value is going to allow the algorithm to backtrack and fill holes in the grid with smaller items, which can result in items appearing out of order. Interesting. Let's give this a try. Grid AutoFlow set to column. So that didn't change anything yet, and I'm sure we're going to find out what's up with that. Like that. So now the algorithm, the auto placement algorithm will kick in when you add a new icon element. However, the algorithm defaults to new column width to be auto, which will not match my current columns. You can override this in your grid auto columns property. So we're going to set our social icons selector to have a grid auto columns property set to 1 fraction. So 1 FR. Now check this out. So we've got the columns template set to be 1 fraction. So the first column is going to take up 1 fraction of the space. The rest is where this property grid autoflow kicks in and sort of like smushes them all in the side. Let's see what happens if we remove that. Now it's saying, cool, each column is 1 fraction long, and put them in 1 row. This way we're saying, hey, try to make this all fit into 1 column, please. Into 1 row, please. So it's just saying like, cool, this takes up as much space as it needs to, and the rest we kind of smush in. Oh, hold up. Grid auto columns. Oh, my mistake. Thanks, learner. So it's grid auto columns. How embarrassing. There we go. Now it's putting them all into 1 column, dividing them up evenly. However, I want to see again what happens if I remove this. So almost there. So with the template was having 1 fraction, which was that big F, and then the rest of them smushed in. If I have grid auto column set to 1 fraction, we've got all of these in a row. But by this, now it's trying to say, cool, have automatically 1 fraction and try and put them all into 1 row. And now the algorithm is evenly setting these up. Yes. Whew. Sorry about that, everyone. Pat, pat. So, like Flexbox, and this is a shared property, we can use align items and justify items to align the content in the grid. So align items will align child elements along the column axis, and justify items will align child elements along the row axis. So let's try and align items along the center. So now we've got, you kind of can see that they're vertically centered now. Watch. At the top, centered. In fact, why am I making this difficult? Let's use a background color of red. And learner says, unlike Flexbox, these two are fixed in the grid. Right. So right now we can see they're centered. If I remove this, they're at the top. And you see how background colors are a really helpful tool for debugging? Or for like in Flexbox, we depended on flex direction. Exactly. Remember, Flexboxes are 1-dimensional, whereas grids are 2-dimensional. So cool, we've aligned them along the center. Passes, pat, pat. Keep moving. So now we're going to move on to our text. I'm going to give that a font size property of 1.88, please, REM, and a letter spacing property of 0.6 pixels. Now you can't quite tell yet, but this letter spacing determines how much space is in between each letter. Bear with me. So right now, the space between each letter is 6 pixels. Can we get that larger? This is going to look weird, friends. Whew. So right now, the letter spacing is 60 pixels in between each letter. It's a little difficult to read. So what we're doing in this exercise is setting that spacing to be 0.6 pixels. So a little wider than 0, kind of gives it this sort of reading cadence. Great. Pat. So our text element is not a CSS grid, but we can still create columns within an element without using grid by using the column width property. So column width is going to be set to 25 rem. Let's see what that does. Hold up. I want to play with this. Cool. So right now, totally cool. By setting the column width, now we've got something that looks like print, which is kind of really exciting. Wow. Well, cool. That is done. Passes. Pat, pat. What happens if I make it narrower? Bear with me. Okay. Yeah, that's no good. So if you hold on, I want to try 10 rem. Is that better? It's not great. How about 18? I want to have 3 columns. Cool. So we can have 3 columns of text. Really, we'll go with the experts and go with 25. I think the 2 columns is pretty nicely legible. Cool. So magazines often use justified text in their print content to structure their layout and control the flow. While this works in printed form, justified text on websites can be an accessibility concern, for example, presenting challenges for folks with dyslexia. So, to make our project look more like a printed magazine, we're going to set our text selector to have a text-aligned property of justify. And let's see how that looks. Okay? So, text align, justify. See how that looks. So what that's doing now, and you see what it means by looking more like print, justifying is trying its best to make the text, all the text lines be equal in width, which kind of gives it a, oh, Cesum says, if you drag the preview frame wider, it should go to 3 columns. Let's give that a try. Ooh, very cool. And Learner says, yeah, letter spacing can also be a bit worrying for dyslexia, indeed. But yeah, so that's how we can use the justify property to space out the text so it kind of looks more like print. Cool. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. Amazing. So our first letter pseudo selector allows us to target the first letter in the text content of an element. So we're going to go with first paragraph and target the first letter. And I bet y'all know what's going to happen. I'm going to set the font size set to be 6 rem. Look at that. The S is now huge. Amazing. Learner says it's basically the size of the viewport divided by column width. Very cool. And give it a color property set of orangered. Oh, see, I'm already making that mistake. Orange, red. I'm sorry, I'm still going to read that as orangered. This letter has been orangered. Cool, that passes. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. So the other text has now been shifted down, so we're going to move it into position by giving the first letter a float property set to left. So now it's kind of like smushed to the side, and a margin right property of 1 rem. Let's see how that looks in columns. It looks better. I hope we're going to adjust it more. I don't know. It looks kind of weird in that position. Pat, pat. Never mind. That's fine. It still works, and I'm not a design expert. I think I would kind of like this to be at the top. So we're going to create an HR selector and give it a margin of 1.5 rem and 0. Remember, the first, when we're doing 2 values here, the first one is vertical margin, and the second one is horizontal margin. You can see that here. This is how it was before. Kind of I keep saying the word smush today. Kind of squished in there. If I put in that margin, now it looks a little bit more like, yeah, this is a quote. Amazing. Pat, pat. Let's keep going. We're going to give our HR a color. So we'll need to adjust the border property of 1 pixel solid and RGBA of 120 red. If I could put in a comma, thank you. 120 green and 120 blue. So that's going to give it a gray color, and an opacity or an alpha channel of 0.6. That is 60% transparent. So that's got like a grayish thing going on, which is quite cool. Pat, pat. All right. We are doing it. So quote selector, we're going to give it a color of #00beef. There is no beef here. Cool. And a font size property of 2.4 rem. So now the quote's nice and big. And a text align property of center. So I can't quite see that here, but if we maybe move this around. Oh dear. Hold on. There we go. That looks nice. So we can see the text is big and centered. Great. Oh, hold on. There we go. Now it's big and... Oh, actually, that looks a lot better. There we go. Now it's big and centered. Oh, quote selector. Yep, I forgot to do that. Pat, pat. There we go. To make the quote stand out more, we're going to give the quote selector a font family. Oh, cool, cool. Family set to railway with a backup of, or a fallback, pardon me, of sans serif. There, that makes it really stand out now. Pat, pat. So quote is not really a quote without proper quotation marks. You can add these with CSS pseudo selectors. So we're going to have a before and an after, both with their content property set to quote. You're going to see what this means. It's going to look super cool. I actually do this on my website as well. I also make them like animate when you hover. Content is set to like that. Oh, with a space following it. That doesn't look right. Oh. With a space preceding it. Oh, I see. So we're going to use... How do I want to put in a quote if I need quotes? You know what? Maybe I can get around this by using single quotes. Hey, cool. Yeah, so the content is going to be single quote, space, double quote, single quote. That way I can put a double quote in here. When we learn about escaping later on, we can probably do that as well. So use the after property to set the content to be quote. So now we can see every quote we have is going to have this before and after. Oh, hold on. Did I misread? Following it and preceding it. I did misread. Season T says, yep, escaping it with a backlash worked for me. Let's try that out just for fun. But first of all, I need to read. Content property set to quote with a space following it. So this is wrong. And then we'll create with a space preceding it, that is coming before. Let's make that with escaping. So what you can do is have a space, and then with the backslash, not the forward slash, the backslash quote mark, this is telling CSS and many other programming languages, like, hey, this next character, don't interpret it as what you think it is. Just print it out as is. Right? So this isn't a quote mark to close our quotes. This is a quote mark for you to display. So you see, it doesn't show the backslash because it's that backslash is saying, hey, just show the quote mark for me, please. This is called escaping in programming. Now you're probably wondering, okay, but what if I want to show a backslash? Well, backslash, right? Hey, don't treat this next backslash as if I want to escape the character after that. Just treat it as a backslash, as in show me a backslash. This is called escaping. So both of these are equivalent. Both of these ways of doing it, I mean. Great. Pat, pat. Thank you, Cesium, for confirming that. Great. So now we're going to style our third section. Note that this has a text and a text with images values for the class attribute. And actually, a lot of the work we've done in text, you're going to see, has already carried over here. So we have our columns already because we styled our text. Because remember, this section has both the class text and the class text with images, which means it's already inheriting the styles from your text rule. So we're going to have a text with images selector and set its display to grid. Right now, we haven't set a layout for a grid, so it's one series of rows. Pat. Cool. So if you see this pop up, just remember this bootcamp is free. Free Code Camp is free. They depend on donations to keep running. If you want to, if you can donate a bit. I'm doing so in my learning account. This is more of a teaching account, so I'll be having it ask me later. But everything's chill, everything's fine. So we're going to give our text with images selector. I'm going to make this a little, because I like seeing those columns. Grid template columns set to be 1 fraction, and now we have 2 fractions. So this means that our grid let me try that again. Our grid has 3 columns, is 3 columns wide, one of which is dedicated to the first section or the first element, and the other one is 2 columns wide. So let's drag this out just a touch. You're going to see the brief history is 1 column wide. These images are 2 columns wide. We're also going to set a column gap property to be 3 rem to provide even more spacing between them. So this is still 1 column wide. You can see we already have a little bit of space there. And this is 2 columns wide. And that's the magic of this fraction element. Unit, pardon me. Pat. Oh, cool. We're going to give it a bottom margin. So let's do that. Margin bottom set to be 3 rem. So now you can see we got a bit of space there at the bottom. Nice and quick. Pat. Let's keep moving. Great. So now we're going to style our lists to have a list style type property set to none. That's going to remove the bullet. Yeah, the bullet points are now gone, which doesn't look great just yet, but I bet we're going to fix this in the next challenge. Pat. And there we go. So first we're going to space out our lists. Margin top set to 2 rem. You notice that I'm scrolling before doing some typing just so I can see the changes happen live. Great, so that's done. Pat. Scroll down to our lists. There we go. So .lists li. So we're going to target each list item inside our lists. And the margin bottom of each of these is going to be 1.5 rem, which is already giving them some more space. That does look nicer already, but I bet there's more work to do. Pat. Cool. So the list title and subtitle selector are going to set them to have some color. List title, comma, list subtitle. The color is going to be #00beef. No beef here. Oh, great. Look at that. Doesn't that already look much better? Getting there. How's it look? Great. Pat. And now we're going to style the images. So the images are wrapped in an aside element. Remember, that's content to the side. That is tangentially or like semi-related to the content itself. I'm going to get using the image wrapper class. So create an image wrapper selector, and its display property is going to be set to grid. Fantastic. You can already see there's a bit of space there. Great. Does it look good? Pat. Let's keep going. And our images should be in a 2-column, 3-row layout. Let's see what that means by stretching this out a little. Great. There's our rows. So in our image wrapper, we're going to give it a grid template columns layout of 2 FR and 1 FR. So the first image is going to be 2 columns wide, and the second one's going to be 1 column wide. And the grid template rows, yeah, is going to have 3 rows, each of which is stretching to be the min content high. Now let's see what this means. What happens if I hide my styles and stretch this all the way? So now we can see we've got 3 rows to our grid and 3 columns. The layout of the columns is 2 fractions wide, so we can see that here, kind of evenly spaced out. 2 fractions wide for the first 2 fractions wide for the first column, and 1 fraction wide for the second column. The other one is the rows. So we got 3 rows here, which is 3 times repeating of being 3 rows, each of which is large enough to fit the content. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So that's how we get this nice long layout for this image here, which I think looks quite cool. Amazing. Let's check our code. Pat. Look at that. We're 91% of the way done. I think we're going to finish today. So instead of having to declare a row gap and a column gap, we can just use the gap. Instead of having to do them pardon me. Say I wanted to have the same row and column gaps. I do not need to write row gap and column gap. I could just use gap. You can also use 2 values to define both the row gap and the column gap property. I'll show you what I mean. So let's say we wanted to have this gap property set to 2 rem. One way to do this is to have row gap set to 2 rem and column gap set to 2 rem. Cool. That's spacing them out by 2 rem. What we can also do is use, we can use the gap property of say, well, for the rows, I want 2 rem, and for the columns, I want 2 rem as well. Is that correct? Yes, that works too. However, since the row and gap values are the same, the row and column values are the same, we can just write gap 2 rem. And that's going to apply both the row and the column gaps. All done. Pat. Amazing. Let's keep going. So, this is new. The place items property can be used to set the align and justify items values at the same time. So it's going to take 1 or 2 values. If 1 value is provided, it's used for both align and justify. But if both, the first one will be used for align and the second one will be used for justify. So place items is going to be set for center. So that's going to both align and justify them in the center. So now the quote is taking up 2 rows. Is that correct? Ooh, that looks cool. Amazing. And you can see it stretching to fill up the content. Amazing. Check our code. Pat. Now we're going to position our images. This is going to be really exciting. So image 1 and dot image dash 3 is going to have a grid column property set to say, hey, start at the first column and go all the way over. Now, let's see what we've got. The first and third images will now span the full width of the grid. See? Same goes here. This is just amazing. And let that speak for the power of CSS Grid, how you can, with these commands, just tell it, hey, fill up the whole thing. Amazing. Pat. Ah, amazing. So now that our magazine is finished, now we're going to make it responsive. So our media is going to be only for the screen, our media query only for screen, not for laptop, for printing, pardon me. Give it a max width of 720 pixels. So this means that any styles we enter here, hold on, did I do this right? What's the syntax? Hold on. Oh, my bad. I think I do it like this. And? You know what, friends? I'm going to look this up. Media queries. Media in CSS. Media queries. How do I do that? Media. Only screen and. So no brackets around only screen. Great. So. Is that better? It looks good. Cool. So all CSS that we write here will only apply if we're looking at this on a screen, on a computer, on a mobile phone, on a watch. I don't know if we want to read this on a watch, but I guess it's possible. And if that screen is up to maximum 720 pixels. So after that, once this width of this viewport becomes bigger than 720 pixels, this CSS we're about to write will not be applied. So the image wrapper property selector will have a property of grid template columns set to be one fraction. This will collapse the 3 images into one column on smaller screens. And you might have noticed already that this kind of like jumped up to take up the full width. This is how it was before. Watch the calculator. Now it's split. Now we're telling it, no, this image wrapper, the columns need to be one fraction only. So take up the full width. Otherwise, so over here, by default, we're applying it to be 2 columns and 1 column wide. 2 fractions and 1 fraction wide, so 2 columns. But if it's a small device or a small screen or a small viewport, it's going to be 1 column wide. And we can try that here by expanding it to be more than 720 pixels wide. Check it out. So there. Once it's 720, this is no longer being applied. And we're going back to our original 2 column layout. But once we're looking at it on a small device, it's 1 column layout. Amazing. Pat. So yeah, we can manipulate grids on smaller screens. So we've got another media query, only on screen, and needs to have a, this is for devices with a maximum width of 600 pixels. And inside that, we're going to create a text with images selector and give it a grid template columns property of 1FR. Let's take a look how it looks now. So now, up until we have 600 pixels in width, we're not going to put this history and the images side by side, but rather put them on top of each other because each row is 1 column wide on a smaller screen. Yeah, but these media queries are a little bit different. This one is for maximum 720. This one's for 600 pixels. So now we've got at least 3 layouts. Check this out. This is up to 600. And once we hit here, this is bigger than 600, but still smaller than 720. The images are still on top of each other. But once we get to 720, boom, new layout. Now neither of these are being applied. Once I get to 720 or smaller, only this one is being applied. And once I get to 600, both of these are being applied. So this is the power of media queries for being responsive. And that's where the word responsive comes from. We're responding to the environment that is, in this case, that we're on a screen and it's got a certain condition of width. Is that done? Pat. We are 98% of the way, friends. I think we may finish a little bit before this lesson ends. But first, we got one more media query, only for screens. And now we've got another one, a max width of 550 pixels. So inside that, we're going to have a hero title selector with a font size of 6 rem with a colon. So up until the width is 550 pixels, the hero title is going to be a little bit smaller. You already saw it. Once it gets bigger, it's big again. Small, big, small, big. Okay, that's enough of that. Sorry. Then we're going to adjust the sizes of hero subtitle, the author, the quote, the list title, and all of these are going to have a font size of 1.8 rem. Did I spell that correctly? I hope so. You can see the author's text is smaller now, and the subtitle as well. Finally, we're going to adjust the size of our social icons, and that's going to have a font size of 2 rem. So that's going to get smaller. Yeah, nice. And finally, a text selector of font size set to be 1.6 rem. So cool. Up until the width is 550 pixels, the text is going to adjust to be smaller so it's more easily readable on smaller devices. But once it's bigger, hey, why not have the bigger text? That way, we respond to smaller devices and we make our websites more responsive. Are we done, friends? No, we are 99% of the way. We have one more, pat. And then we're done. We can go off for the weekend. One final media query, only for screens, and max width of 420 pixels. So this is when a screen is especially small. We're going to adjust our hero title to have a font size property set to be 4 rem. So on especially small devices or screens, you can see we adjusted the font size once again. So 4.5, 6 rem, and then what was it again? Where's our hero title? 8 rem. So now it's 8 rem, now it's 6, and now it's, what's it, 4.5? 4.5. Pat. My friends, we have built a magazine. Let's take a step back and admire our work, if I may. Just going to leave a little bit of space there so we can respond to it. Our new curriculum, got our social icons, everything's set into columns. It's got a nice print-like thing. It's justified. It adjusts to the size of our screen. So we're using the columns here to have 2 or 3 columns. Let's go down. We've got side by side our semantic. What was this element again? Sorry. What was the history here? I remember it being something interesting. An article. Yes, of course. The article of the history. So that we can tell any kind of crawlers or something that this is like, hey, this is a history of our curriculum. And this is the aside content, the images. Learner says this was a really good project. I agree. I love this project. Cool. So we can see here on the left, once we make it smaller, boom, that's going to be one column. And now even smaller, boom, it's now one big column. And it adjusts automatically to our screen sizes. Whew. Well done, everyone. We did it. Timmy Phil says, good one. Thank you. It's a fun project. So we are done with our magazine. I already pat myself on the back, so I won't do that again. However, hey, we've completed this. Once again, the bootcamp is free. Free Code Camp is free. If you want to donate to Free Code Camp, you can. $5 a month. But you don't have to do it now. Don't stress. Everything's fine. We can go ask me later. And take a step back. So let's take a look at what we'll be doing next. Because next week, my friends, is the last week of this bootcamp. We are almost at the end. So we'll be starting next week with the product landing page. We'll do the Ferris wheel and the penguin. And then we'll do the personal portfolio. So let's take a look at our schedule once again. I'm going to post that again into the chat. So, learner, I'm not going anywhere. Maybe just not here every morning for me. So, project next Monday, Ferris wheel on Tuesday, penguin on Wednesday, portfolio page on Thursday, and our closing party on Friday. So don't be sure not to miss any of these. Also, Naya is going to be coming in on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to do our partner sessions. And finally, Phil Hawksworth from Netlify is going to be here on Tuesday at 10 a.m. UTC to show us and introduce us to Netlify. It's going to be a joy, so be sure not to miss any of that. Until then, don't worry if you came in late today. Everything's on YouTube, youtube.com/AdBat Website Club. And we are done for the week. Congratulations on making it another week through this. I don't know about the rest of you friends. I'm going to take it extremely easy. I hope that you too remember learning is a journey and it takes time and there's no rush. There's no stress. Well, sorry. You know what? I realized I didn't give you all the space to ask questions. I'll hold a moment for any questions we might have. In fact, I might bring my screen back. Just in the meantime, ask me any questions you have, please. Let's look at these align item content. So in Flexbox, align items controls the alignment of items on the cross axis, whereas in Grid, it controls the alignment of items on the block axis within their grid area. So let's see what that means. What's a cross axis? So in Flexbox, cross axis runs perpendicularly to the main axis. So as learner correctly said, our flex direction is either row or row reverse, then the cross axis goes along down the columns. Whereas in columns, it goes along the rows. So it's perpendicular, that is 90 degrees along our Flexbox. So align items is going to align items along that perpendicular axis. Whereas in Grid, it's always going to do the block axis. That is, I would have assumed, what was it again? Sorry, my memory is bad. What lesson was that? Let's go back here. I think align items was along the rows and justify items was along the columns, but let's find out. That's not it. City sky column. Thank you, learner. It was columns. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So align items is going to go along only the columns, whereas for Flexbox, it's going to depend on which direction you've picked. Okay, well, cool. If there are no questions, then I'll let you all go and have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll see y'all on Monday, and take care of yourselves. Bye for now.